Welcome to Luvbites. Luvbites. By Dr. Tara, your destination for sexual wellness and mindful relationship advice. Hope you're having an orgasmic day.
Are you looking to take sexual pleasure to a whole new level? Bijoux Indiscrets provides a variety of ways to enhance your sex life. From pleasurable sex toys, erotic accessories, and intimate products, Bijoux Indiscrets is sure to have just what you need. Check out their slow sex line for unique products that will enhance your foreplay, like nipple play gel and clitoral balm. Check out the link in the show notes and use code LUVBITES20 for 20% off at checkout. Have an orgasmic play. Anal plug, Benwell balls, dildo, cock ring, and the great vibrator. Sex toys. We've all seen them, own them, hate them, love them. But after this episode, you're going to know the history of sex toys. And how fun is that? You can bring it up at dinner conversations to spice up your boring dinner. Hello, my loves. It's Dr. Tara, your favorite sex and relationship expert here at Luvbites. Today, we're having a conversation with the great Hallie Lieberman. She is a historian and journalist. She's the author of Buzz, A Stimulating History of the Sex Toy, and is currently working on a book on the history of gigolos. Her writing has appeared in BuzzFeed News, the New York Times, Washington Post, Vice, and just a long list of publications. When not writing or reading about sex or food or comedy, very relatable. She's organizing Oreo tasting parties, binge watching Below Deck, ogling male strippers, and hunting for new cereal flavors. Very interesting hobbies. Hello, Hallie.
Hello. I love that, like, you reading the cereal thing and like, what?
You're like, I did not green light that bio.
I don't know. My bio is so ridiculous. Like I used to take it seriously and now I like to put junk food in there. I don't know why.
It's awesome. It makes you very relatable. I mean, sex toys, Oreo tasting, male strippers, new cereal.
What more do you need in life?
Okay, Hallie, I'm so excited for this conversation with you, especially on the history of the sex toy. So how should we get started? Can you tell us more about the history of the sex toys and we'll just go from there?
Yeah. So the first sex toys, I mean, no one can pinpoint the exact first sex toy in human history, but we've seen sex toy-like objects that are dated to about 30,000 years old in Germany. They're like these phallic things that look like dildos, and people debate, what were they used for? Were they ceremonial? I choose to believe no. They were used for masturbation. So as early as humans have been around, there have probably, I will couch it in that, probably been sex toys. But I start really studying, and Liz Estrada mentioned sex toys, ancient Greek stuff. But I start really being interested in sex toys or telling the story in the 1800s and 1900s with the rubber dildo, classic sex toy. We know them, we love them, or as you say, we hate them, which I took personal offense at. No, I mean, some people hate sex toys, but, I start there and go from the rubber dildos in the mid 1800s.
Mid 1800s. Okay, before we start there, were there like sex toys from like the Roman times? Because I feel like they were so sexual.
Oh.
They had those like sex parties.
Yeah. So there were sex toys. There were some made of leather. Some used olive oil as lubricant.
Of course.
And so, And so there were dildos, not really vibrators. There's this like myth that Cleopatra, have you heard this myth that Cleopatra had? Okay, so that she had a vibrator with buzzing bees on the inside. That's how it vibrated. I know it sounds made up because it is. So yeah, there were some sex toys, then you can see them on vases, and their depictions of them. There's one from a Greek vase that shows people holding a basket of dildos. So yeah, I mean, we don't know exactly how they're used. Again, people debate and say it's ceremonial. Although in Lysistrata, they say, oh, well, if men go to war, we'll threaten a sex strike, and then we can stay home with our dildos and masturbate. Olisthos. And so then you see, and that's, I mean, that the interesting thing about the history when we go back that far, when we start with writing and see what like kind of the first writing about sex toys is, and depictions of objects. But the first writing, it shows men being threatened by dildos. That is like the through line through the history of sex toys. The earliest things are, you know, we're going to use these to replace men, and men are going to be freaked out by them. And the earliest sex toys, yeah, it's fascinating. And they look like dicks, you know, so because most of them were designed by men. I mean, when men design sex toys, they look down at the crotch, go, this is my dick is awesome. I'm going to make something that looks like it for women. That's what women.
I love that. Wow. So insightful of the male psychology.
Yeah.
So, okay. So you researched into the modern history of sex toys, and it starts, I guess, modern, quote unquote, starts from like the 1800s. So tell us more about that.
Yeah. So, I mean, in the 1800s, so rubber gets vulcanized. And so that means like rubber, and this is when we start seeing condoms. Okay. This is when rubber goes from being this material that cracks in cold weather, it melts in heat. They developed this new process that makes rubber more stable. And then you got the rubber dildo, and you got rubber galoshes, but who cares about them? You have all this rubber stuff. But rubber companies are like, hey, we're going to try to sell this new material, vulcanized rubber, in any way we can. Anytime we have a new material, we try to make sexual products from it, or new technology, just like VR. We got all the VR porn, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it's the same sort of thing. And so we have the rubber dildo coming out, and it becomes to backtrack a little bit, it's illegal to sell sex toys.
Oh, really?
Starting around 1873. So rubber dildo comes out a little bit before then. It's still legal to sell them, but it's morally kind of reprehensible. 1873, we have this Vice Crusader Anthony Comstock, who lobbies Congress successfully to get a law passed that bans the sale of immoral rubber objects. And what he means by immoral rubber objects are sex toys, are contraceptives like condoms, and he outlaws, like, gets a law passed outlawing pornography and statues of female and statues of genitals, all these things.
So in the late 1800s, these things were illegal.
Yes.
Dildos, condoms, porn.
All that stuff.
Wow. And then what happens?
So you have this guy, and you have to imagine this guy who made this stuff illegal. He's fat, that's fine, but he's got mutton chops. He's like a real downer. He's very religious. And as a Jew, I'm always seeing anti-Semitism everywhere, to be fair. But this guy's actually anti-Semitic. He's like writing down, he's like, I ran after a Jew selling, dildo. He doesn't say dildos, immoral objects and porn, and those Jews this, those Jews that. He was anti-Semitic, a little racist, as people were then.
So anyway, were the people selling dildos Jews?
There were a lot of Jews and a lot of immigrants. Now,
why is that?
Like Italians. It's because, so again, this goes to discrimination and anti-Semitism and racism. People were being pushed out. There are a couple of reasons. One was people were being pushed out of respectable industries like Jews. That's why they went into movie making in the early 1900s and movie theaters, because it was disreputable.
Right.
Same thing. Jews were considered, there was discrimination against them. So they had to get any job they could.
Mm-hmm.
And this was one business that they didn't care who you are. Like it was considered, it was marginally illegal, and then it became illegal. And so it was like this attracted people who just needed a job. So you get a lot of these people, and then you have, these Christian, crusaders like Comstock who work with the YMCA, who Young Man's Christian Association. And we're like, oh my God, these evil people are, ruining our lives. But anyway, vestiges of the Comstock law. So sex toys remained illegal after this, even to the 21st century, even when I was selling sex toys. And there is in Alabama, they're still technically illegal.
Right now? Now, 2022.
Yeah, but the law isn't, used. I just talked to an Alabama sex toy store owner. So the law isn't really enforced, but what she told me, and she's actually 3 generations, her mom works there, she works there, her daughter works there. Wow. Amazing. But she told me that they don't use the word sex in the store. So they're selling sex toys without doing that because of the laws. It's nuts. It's nuts.
So they say they sell intimate products?
Yeah, and health products and stuff like that.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, it's kind of ridiculous. And she said when she opened her store like 6 years ago, she didn't do any advertising because she was worried about it. Now, though, she's become like, this is a small town in Alabama. She's become like part of a pillar of the community. The preacher's wife is one of their best customers.
Oh, of course.
Of course. And she's terrified that her children, the preacher's wife is terrified her children will find Sugar and Spice, the name of the thing, the store, on her credit card statement. So the owner of the store actually installed an ATM so that the woman doesn't have to have any record of it. But she told me, she's like, well, what does she think? If she dies, like where she'll die and her kids will find these, her kids won't find the dildos all around her house. Like, obviously they will. Like, it doesn't, the logic isn't true. But anyway, yeah, still legal today in some places.
Okay. So then we fast forward from that time to then in the 1900s where, I really want to know this. Like, were women ever treated by doctors on their genitals for hysteria? Like, was a vibrator issued or prescribed for hysteria?
No. And I will say no one more time. That is a myth. And I've been working to try to demolish this myth for like 10 years, beginning with academic articles, ending with an op-ed in the New York Times. That never happened. And that myth is very hard to kill. The truth of it is that doctors try to use vibrators in doctors' offices.
This started when?
So this started in the late 1800s, probably around 1880s. So with Joseph Mortimer Granville. He was kind of the inventor of the vibrator, the electromechanical vibrator. So before then, we had hand crank vibrators that were sold to consumers, which are kind of amazing. It hurts your hand. I mean, masturbating can be strenuous enough on your hand, but this so it's like, it's not saving you much energy. But anyway, they had those. They had ones that were steam powered. They had ones that were water powered, pneumatic air powered. But when electricity was introduced in the late 1800s, but really early 1900s, when it got into people's home, then we see the electromechanical vibrator.
Okay. And so the doctors were prescribing the vibrators for something?
No. So the vibrators were so expensive when they came out. So it was like you would go to a doctor's office initially, and some doctors would like treat your back pain with a vibrator. Or treat your deafness. If you had hearing problems, they would stick like an attachment in your ear and vibrate it. I mean, it made sense.
So a vibrator isn't sexual. Like, it's just a little tool that vibrates.
Yeah. So it was like, your readers your listeners can't hear this. Can't see this. But that's the sound of a vibrator from like 1905. Gosh. Okay. and I'm holding this up. It hurts my hand. It's very heavy. It's this huge motor and wooden handle. And it has this little thing, that metal thing that sticks out, and then you'd screw on different attachments. And the one that I have right now is this flat attachment. But there were attachments for your ears, to stick in your ears. There were attachments for your scalp. There were phallic attachments to stick. They were called rectal and vaginal, to stick in your vagina or rectum. But those were not really, like, occasionally those would be used in doctors' offices, but they weren't on the clitorises. They were inside, anus and vagina.
So it is not true that it was prescribed to treat female hysteria.
Well, yeah, it's not true. It was used to treat female hysteria on the clitoris. Hysteria was one of 300 things that the vibrators companies claimed their devices used. A few doctors use it for hysteria on women's backs, not on their clitorises.
Okay.
So it was never no one ever said, it was never like a doctor diagnosed with you with hysteria and then said, hey, I'm going to put a vibrator in your clitoris until you have an orgasm. Now you're cured. No one ever did that. Usually, most doctors didn't use vibrators. So that's the basic thing. The doctors who did, most of them weren't using them on genitals. The few that were not using them for hysteria, and they were using them internally and not on the clitoris. And it was for uterine issues. Yeah. But anyway, most doctors didn't do that. Oh, go on.
So since the early 1900s towards, that whole 1900s, like, what's the next big event that happened in the sex toy industry?
Yeah. So what happens, 1905, American Medical Association says vibrators are a delusion and a snare. Doctors shouldn't use them. And then vibrator companies go, oh shit, we have to, doctors are no longer a market. Let's sell them to consumers. So they start selling them all these health. Oh, it reduces wrinkles. Oh, it, makes you vigorous. And they sell them with all these sexual kind of seeming themes, like with these women with low cut dresses and they're vibrating their stomachs. It says curing indigestion. It was very confusing. And they're advertised all over New York Times, all over Chicago Tribune, because they're not openly sexual. So there's hints at sexuality, but no one's saying these are devices for masturbation. So they kind of skate through culture. But dildos, on the other hand, cannot be advertised in the New York Times, because we all know dildos are for sex and they're sex toys. Next big event that happens in the history of vibrators is really the 1960s with Betty Dodson. Are you familiar with her?
Nope.
Okay. So she was this artist who was, became this kind of masturbation advocate. So Dodson masturbated as a child, as we all do, or most of us do. And she felt weird about it. This was in Kansas in the 1930s. Anyways, finally, she grows up. She's 29 years old. Her partner asks her, will you masturbate in front of me? She's terrified. She does it, though, because this powerful experience. She thinks her vagina, and this is in the 60s, because she thinks her labia are ugly. She thinks all this stuff. He shows her porn magazines, and it's like, no, your labia is beautiful. She is so inspired by this. She starts, she learns about the Hitachi magic wand at this time in the 70s. So we fast forward a little bit to 60s and 70s. She's so inspired, has all these orgasms with this thing that she decides to have these feminist consciousness raising groups where she teaches other people about their genitals, about how to give themselves orgasms with vibrators, and they all get naked together, and it's all kind of like feminist circle jerks. Well, other feminists, second wave feminists are like, what? No. Like, this is too much for us. We're radical, but not that radical. Betty Friedan's like, 1,000 vibrators aren't going to, give us equal rights. Like, contraception is still like illegal for unmarried women at this time. So it's like, hold up, Betty, other Betty. But anyway, so that's the big thing. And she like holds up a vibrator and declares like, vibrators will liberate us from economic dependence on men, from dependence on men for our orgasms. We can, be these independent women if we provide orgasms for ourselves. We don't have to depend on a man. And that freaks the shit out of men, including Norman Mailer and other people who are like, oh my God, vibrators are going to ruin society. So that male fear of vibrators, she keyed into it and said, yeah, you don't need this if you got this tool.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. So that was 60s and 70s. And then you named a few men that were like, oh, hell no. What did they do?
So, well, they just wrote about it. They were mad about it. And so what was interesting though, was it was legal to sell a sex toy if it was sold as a hollow strap-on unit for impotence. And so I know. And so there was this company that is now Doc Johnson. But there was this company that was manufacturing sex toys, started by Ted Marche, a ventriloquist. And they made these hollow strap-on units, and they were called marital aids. And that way, so the marital aid was okay because it was furthering, because a man was wearing it. So a man's still providing pleasure to a woman because he's strapping it on over his dick. And he's having sex with a woman. So that's okay. That's legal. But the thing that Dodson's talking about, just masturbating and saying, bye, man, don't need you, that's illegal. So our laws are kind of formed and, furthered by this kind of double standard that we even see today, where erectile dysfunction drugs on Facebook and Instagram are allowed to be advertised, but sex toys are not. We still have it today. And that's not laws, as the company policy, but Facebook is basically a government organization now. Not really, but.
Well, okay, now that we know a little bit more about like the history, how, the vibrator and the treating female hysteria was false, and really it was used for different medical reasons, but it wasn't used on the clit. And then there was this iconic woman about liberation and female liberation and vibrator use during the 60s and 70s. When does the heavy commercialization of vibrators start?
So it actually starts like right after this with Betty Dodson. So she partners with Del Williams, who was a second wave feminist who was into vibrators. And Williams started this sex toy, the first women's own sex toy store in New York City called Eve's Garden. They start selling sex toys with this feminist bent. After that, you get another one in the West Coast called Good Vibrations, another feminist sex toy store. And then Doc Johnson is the company that really, really commercializes it. And the Ted Marche, the ventriloquist guy I was talking about and making the hollow strap on, he helps form this company called Doc Johnson. And they say, we want to be the crest of vibrators. We want to be the, brand everyone thinks about. We want outlets everywhere. Well, society wasn't ready for that. We did have Doc Johnson becomes the most recognizable sex toy brand in the US. They didn't have the kind of outlets to sell it that they wanted, but there are a bunch of adult bookstores start carrying more sex toys. So usually the adult bookstore, they were called that because they literally carried dirty books, porn books, porn magazines. This is a time before the internet. You can't surf and get every single sexual fantasy you want. If you want to look at naked pictures of people fucking, you have to go to this adult bookstore and get the magazine. This is a time before VCRs, when you can't even, watch on video unless you've got like this setup in your house to watch like Super 8 films or whatever. Most people didn't have that. So anyway, these stores start carrying more and more sex toys. And then you have more sex toy catalogs coming out. And it becomes commercialized that way. So that's when it started in the 70s. You also see the invention of the silicone dildo then.
Wow. Okay. So the 70s, a lot of things were happening as related to sex toys.
Yes, absolutely. Like really the sexual revolution for sex toys was more in the 70s and the 60s.
Okay. And then that Doc, what was it? Doc Martin?
Doc Johnson, yeah.
Doc Johnson. Is it still a huge sex toy company now?
Oh my God, yes, it is. Now we have, I mean, you can find Doc Johnson sex toys in like in most sex toy stores, not necessarily like the feminist ones, but in most like more mainstream ones.
So back in like 70s, 80s, and I guess like it goes into like early 2000s, when you wanted to buy a sex toy, you would go to like adult bookstore.
Yes. And so the problem was though, so you'd have to go to an adult bookstore or order from a catalog. The problem was these are all located in these like really sketchy areas of town on the outskirts. And and that's not because owners wanted to be there. It's because to regulate sex toys, not only do we have these laws saying it's illegal to own them or it's illegal to, some of them were ownership, some were selling, but we also have the main way sex toys are regulated are by having these zoning laws saying you want to open a store if it has 20% or more sex toys. We're considering it a sex toy store, and you got to locate it 500 feet from a church, 500 feet from a school, this, that. And it becomes so onerous that they're like, in the middle of a field in Iowa. I mean, it's ridiculous.
Oh my gosh. So during this time, were people really accepting of sex toys, or it was just a really small group of people?
No, people were not really accepting of sex toys. I mean, it was, it was a small group of people. It was like the stats at the time said like 10% of consumers had ever used a sex toy when now it's like over 50%. So it was pretty like niche thing. Although you start to see them show up in TV shows and movies a little bit. So you start to see that in the 80s, but they frequently show up as weapons, which is weird. It's like
weapons.
Yeah.
Oh my God, give us an example of like a movie that had a sex toy as a weapon.
I forget the titles. So I can give you an example of but they're hitting each other with weapons. Like Neighbors 2, I can give you an example off the top of my head of a more recent movie that has that trope. I don't know if you saw Neighbors 2.
No, but they were fighting with dildos?
Yeah, it's like Seth Rogen hitting I think Zac Efron with a giant dildo.
Interesting.
But that trope shows up in the 80s as well. It shows up in video games too. So it shows up in a lot of media. But they were niche for a long time. I mean, they were not like, you wouldn't have told your friends you used a sex toy back in the 80s. No way. I mean, you would have, like, a woman who did that would be viewed as like a lonely woman who couldn't get sex any other way.
Like a witch.
Yeah, exactly. Like a witch, like an old crone, like so like sex toys in the 1800s or early 1900s were like dildos were sometimes sold as widow's delight. And that kind of gives you a sense of what they thought the consumer was like.
Oh my gosh. Like, oh my gosh, here, your husband died. Here's a dildo.
Exactly. Well, in like women whose husbands were whalers actually used dildos. There's like the Nantucket like whaling community. There's like all these. So it was seen as like really, but behind all this is like the idea men provide sexual pleasure. If the man's not there, you need a replacement. But if he's there, you don't need your dildo. Throw it in the trash. And of course, that's stupid.
Right. And I do find that problematic, especially if it doesn't come from a place of love. Like, if it comes from a place of ego and control. Sometimes if, I've seen women that always prefer their toys over their partner, which is, if it's a preference and if it's communicated up front, like completely fine. However, people want to function in their relationships, it's fine. But a lot of times it's not communicated upfront and they only rely on their sex toys and completely neglect a partnership. I feel like that could be problematic too.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, if you're like, sorry, honey, I'm going to masturbate like upstairs and I'm never going to have sex.
Yeah. Like, fuck you. You go jerk off. I'll see you later.
Yeah. Like, sorry, your tongue does not work like a Hitachi magic wand. I'm not interested. Like, yeah, that's not good. There can be an extreme reliance on it, but there's always, yeah. So of course there can be, but there's always been like a greater like fear among men that that's what's going to happen, that women will replace them with a dildo than would actually happen, because like dildos, you know, don't like cook dinner and, you know, all and massage your shoulders and all the things I expect men to do for me, which I know most people don't expect men to do this, but whatever.
Yeah. I mean, my partner cooks dinner and massages me.
Great.
And I'm always fucking horny. So it works.
Yeah, exactly. I know my partner goes down on me regularly. I'm like, if you were a gigolo and did all these things, like you could charge me like thousands of dollars.
Oh my gosh, that's so true. Okay, I wanted to move forward to the 2000s. So, okay, what do we know about the 2000s and sex toys?
Yeah, so the 2000s and sex toys, we really see this kind of boom. So just like to rewind to 1998, we first see like a sex toy on a TV show that really changes the game. We've seen them like a little bit before, but we see it on Sex and the City. Charlotte, have you seen this episode?
Not sure.
Okay, so Charlotte gets addicted to her vibrator. That's how it's portrayed. And everyone has a vibrator invention. And it's like the rabbit vibrator. Do you know the rabbit?
Yes. Yeah. Okay, I remember now. Yes.
Yeah. And so it's portrayed as Charlotte's not going to ever have a relationship again if she keeps using the vibrator. We got to get it away from her. Meanwhile, what viewers of the show got from it was, hey, there's these awesome vibrators out there that simulate your clit and your vagina. I got to go get them. They missed that whole other message, which is great. But sex toys are portrayed in this kind of like negative way, but they're on screen, which is like a big deal. So the early 2000s, you see sex toy parties, like Tupperware parties, where women are going into people's houses and selling sex toys. And I did that. And it's basically like Tupperware, where you are trying to sell the most stuff you can to people. And so that's why I told, you know, woman, yeah, you need to buy this butt plug and bring it on your honeymoon, because that's what lots of people do. And your husband he won't think that you think he's gay.
Wait, so you would go, like, you would host these little parties where you would show different sex toys and sell them?
Yeah. So basically, a woman would say, hey, I want to have a sex toy party. And then I would be the sales lady who would come in with all these sex toys and I'd turn them on. But I was doing this in Texas where it was illegal. So I couldn't.
Damn, that sounds dangerous.
I know. My mom called me crying, was like, Hallie, please stop. Don't sell sex toys. And I was like, and my dad's in the background, it'll be good for her career. If she gets arrested. Sorry. But anyway, so yeah, I'm doing this and I get like this like lecture from the company, from my mentor, who was like, don't use the word vibrator. We're not allowed to use that. I was like, okay, that's weird. But she said, say massager. Don't say the word clitoris because we could get arrested. Say man in the boat. So all this kind of like stuff I'm supposed to say. And I do that on the first day of hosting a party. And I'm like, this is so ridiculous. This is fucking ridiculous. I'm just going to say clitoris. If I get arrested for saying clitoris, what the hell? That's a good story. But yeah, so I'm selling these and these become a popular thing. There are a lot of companies that are doing it. Candy Burris from Real Housewives gets in the game in the 2000s with bedroom candy. But they're also like multi-level marketing schemes. So there's also a sketchy aspect to them.
Okay. So in the early 2000s, that was really common. And then like, was there a point in time in the 2000s where there's like such growth of sex toy shops everywhere?
Yeah. So what we see is sex toys entering CVS, entering Walgreens and like vibrating cock rings and sometimes like bullets. So that's like the first.
They sold vibrating cock rings at CVS.
Starting in the 2000s as sex toys in states where the sex toy laws began to fall and be challenged, then you see corporations saying, okay, we can do this. But like the Texas anti-sex toy law didn't go away until 2008. Other ones were later. So, but yeah, they were packaged with condoms usually.
Wow. I didn't know that. I mean, I kind of frequently go to CVS and Walgreens. I've never seen sex toys.
Yeah, well, and now check it out because there are even more like elaborate sex toys in there. And now Walmart was late to this. They started carrying them like a few years ago, in 2019. But CVS and Walgreens start carrying them. But of course, again, they're not carrying giant like dick-looking things. They're carrying things that men can wear on their penises to provide pleasure for women. Again, that's more acceptable. But yeah, so we see like a proliferation of more sex toy shops in the 2000s. A lot of them are like the trashy, like adult XXX Emporium stores. Like, do you know the type? Do you have those in LA?
Probably, yeah, but not the gas station ones.
Oh, not like the biscuits and porn one that I went to in North Carolina. Actually, they didn't have sex toys there, unfortunately. Oh. But yeah, so you see a lot of that. You see the Adam and Eve company have a lot of stores, and you also see, but it wasn't really like the brick and mortar. You see more feminist sex toy stores. It wasn't really the brick and mortar things that were the biggest. It was like online, you know. You could now, Amazon comes around, you start seeing sex toys on Amazon. And that leads more women to buy them because again, you still have all the sex toy stores are located in these like crappy, scary areas of town. And most of the customers are men because they have booths in the back where literally men are jacking off, ejaculating onto the floor while watching movies. And women don't want to be in that environment.
Wow. So people can do that at some of the sex toy shops?
Yes. So they have all these booths, and that's a whole other story with the masturbation booths or the peep show booths, as they call them. And some of them have glory holes in them. And so you have this like just skeezy environment, you know, that like women don't want to go to. That's why you even have these feminist sex toy stores in the 70s and the 80s and through the 2000s. I mean, before people in the 2000s, more people had internet, so they didn't have to go there. But even with internet, they have wives, they have girlfriends at home. They don't want to jack off at home. So you still have these porno booths today in Atlanta.
Interesting. I've been to quite a lot of sex toy shops, but I haven't witnessed these like jerk off booths. But I mean, to each their own, man. Like if you want to go to a booth and jerk off, like, you know, power to you.
Well, exactly. Like I'm totally fine. Like jerk off in a booth everywhere. Just have one of them for women too. Like #feminism. Like
no, I would like a jerk off booth, please.
Exactly. So like that's what these stores didn't have. It was just all for men again. And so feminist sex toy stores like just got rid of the booths. But anyway, you see the real equality, like with the proliferation of the internet, women can order things online. They don't have to go into these stores and you know, risk, you know, getting semen all over them. And so they're able to order online. There's the anonymity of that. And that really helped. And even Amazon, even though like, I don't like Amazon, I bought crappy product, like a butt plug that part broke off in my ass. And I was fine, luckily. But anyway, I don't like them, but it normalized things. The fact that you have these big retailers and you started to see like retailers, like now you have Nordstrom carrying them online only, Sephora online only. You started to see like major retailers more recently do that as well. So that led to the normalizing in a lot of ways.
Yeah, I feel like especially in big cities, everywhere in the world, sex toys are so normal. But they are they are still like a taboo within the interpersonal interaction for some people. And of course, societally in many, many parts of, even in the United States, it's still a taboo.
Yeah, it's like we think of like on the one hand, it's like you got Gwyneth Paltrow talking about sex toys and promoting them through Goop and all this stuff. And it's like, that's great. Then you have the New York Times ask her, do you use sex toys? And she goes, and doesn't answer it. And to me, yeah, that sums up the attitudes. Like there's some sort of limit to people being completely comfortable with them. But you do have like the Instagram friendly sex toy now. You have more women, like the big shift is more women are designing sex toys. So people are less embarrassed to talk about them in a way because they look like art objects in millennial pink that you can have in your Zoom background.
Yes.
Yeah, which is awesome. And so, but you're right, the interpersonal thing. So people will be like, yay, sex toys, and they're fine. And then you talk to people, even Gen Z, and you're like, hey, do you talk to your partner about sex toys, or do you buy it? Like, and they'll be like, oh no, yeah, he doesn't like them, or, so it's like some of it's just talk where it's like, yeah, we're all accepting of this, but you're right. Within interpersonal relationships, definitely more people will have used them. Like I said earlier, but there's still some people are still really uncomfortable with them.
Yeah. Even though like now when you go online and you Google sex toys or like sex toy shop, there is, I swear, at least like 100 online stores.
Oh yeah. I mean, there are so many online stores. I mean, and good ones that will have like, here's our, curated thing. Here's exactly how you use it and where you use it, which is stuff you wouldn't get in like a XXX store with people jacking off in it. Like they sold dirty, crappy, toys, and people were embarrassed and no one's giving you instructions and no one knew what they were doing. And here online, you'll get everything. You'll get all as a concierge service. It's
almost, yeah.
Yeah.
There are really curated stores. Like one of my friends owns My Pleasurist, and it's very curated. Like every product in there is from like a women-owned company. They're all medical grade like products, like body safe, all of that. But the thing to me about like all of these online stores is how do you know which one is good,
Well, that's the problem now, because there's the pink washing, and there's, when I talk to sex toy store or sex toy manufacturers, they say like there are companies out there who are like, yay, we have a female leader, female design, but it's not really, and they're getting everything off the shelf, pre-made in China, really cheap. So it's hard to know, because that is the thing now, is that it's female owned. Like that's the marketing thing. And a lot of these places are great that are female owned in design, and some of them are faking it. It's really, really hard to know. And like, for me, it's like, well, I know because I interview these people, but from a consumer standpoint, it's, so hard to know. And so you have the whole like, Epiphora, like you have the vibrator reviewers. And so it's like, okay, do I want to trust the vibrator reviewers? Yes. But are some of them getting money from vibrator companies? It's just really, really hard to know.
Yeah, it is hard to know. I definitely do my research before I buy something, and I make sure that, I don't necessarily have to stick with something that I don't like completely love, because I have so many options.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, there are companies that are great. Like Dame is great. Crave is great. Like, you know what you're getting with these, and you're getting like really high quality, like female design products.
Yes. And shout out to my friend's store, My Pleasurist. Okay. So I have a question for you, and this is the last question before we go and play our little game. You were saying about like how we're liberated more or less today. So like, how are we less liberated in a way about sex toys today?
Yeah. So this is what is fascinating to me. Like in the early 1900s, vibrators were everywhere. They were in all the ads, like I mentioned, like in mainstream publications. they were, promoted by famous actresses of the day, not like just like Demi Lovato, who's fine, but whatever. And I mean, Gwyneth Paltrow is pretty big, but anyway, so they were promoted in mainstream publications, and people talked about them, and they could say the word vibrator in an advertisement, and there was no problem. Now, New York Times website, you're not going to see any sex toy ads. Social media, you don't really see them because they're banned from most social media. So in a way, we were more liberated about vibrators back then because we weren't open about what they were used for, that they were used sexually. We just hinted at it. Now that we're completely open, when Betty Dodson and other pioneers busted it open and said, hey, these are for masturbation, these are for women to not depend on men or partners, that made them even more threatening because we were very clear. And so today, yes, we're open about what vibrators are used for. We see them in more outlets like Walmart and Walgreens, but there is still this fear of them. There's still this ban on some advertising, like even in the Metropolitan Transport Authority in New York City subways didn't allow sex toy ads initially, and only allowed erectile dysfunction because we're being so open about them and what they're used for. They're threatening our gender norms, and they're putting like raw female sexuality and desire out there in a way that they weren't in the 1900s. So the more open, paradoxically, the more open we are about the uses of sex toys, the more they have to stay hidden a bit. So we were more open about vibrators in the early 1900s in some ways.
Oh my gosh. Okay. Now that you explained that, that makes sense. Cause I'm like, there's no way. We're like so much more open-minded about that shit now. But okay, I see, because vibrators back then was like medical reasons, like for your back, for your neck.
Yeah.
For your hips. But now that it's like, oh yeah, we love putting vibrators in our clit. Places don't want to advertise them.
Yes, exactly. And then it becomes, and that's why like Sephora doesn't have them in the store. I hope someday they do.
I hope so. I have a feeling we're moving towards that direction. What do you think?
I think so too. I think, Spencer's has them in the store, a ton of them. So yeah, I think we're moving towards it.
Yeah, I'm hoping so too, because anything that's related to sexual wellness should really be normalized.
Absolutely.
All right, Hallie, thank you for a very interesting and educational conversation. I'd like to move into 10 quickies with Dr. Tara. Are you ready?
I am so ready.
All right. Just give me a word, a sentence, or just a noise back.
Okay.
Number 1, anal plug.
Yes.
Number 2, dildos.
The best.
Number 3, cock ring. Number 4, nipple clamps.
Overrated.
Number 5, dick pumps.
That
was it.
Yeah.
Where are we? Damn, I lost track.
Number 6.
Number 6, squirting.
Oh, I can't do it.
Number 7, gigolos.
Love them.
Number 8, porn.
Yes, love it.
Number 9, G-spot.
Don't have it.
Number 10, vibrator.
The best. We all should own them.
Yes. Okay, before you go, any like wise words, last words?
Life's too short to not masturbate.
That should be a quote on a t-shirt. Thank you so much, Hallie. Okay. Where can people find you and your book?
They can find my book, Amazon, any place you buy books. They can find me on Twitter, Instagram, just my name, Hallie Lieberman.
Awesome. I will have those links in today's show notes. Thank you so much for today, Hallie.
Okay. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much, my loves, for tuning in and listening to this conversation. I hope you've learned something new today. And per usual, have an orgasmic day. Massages can be sexually arousing. Upgrade your foreplay with an amazing massage candle by Maude. It's body safe and skin softening. Once melted and extinguished, it can be poured on the skin. And let the fun begin. Check out the link in this episode's description and have an orgasmic time.
Thanks for listening. This was Love Bites.
Love Bites.
By Dr. Tara. Follow Dr. Tara on social media at lovebites.co. Have an orgasmic day.